night air inside the Copa room at the Sands Hotel felt alive, thick with laughter, clinking glasses, and the kind of electricity that only legends could create. It was August 12th, 1962, and the Rat Pack were in their element. Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr., Peter Lawford, and Joey Bishop. 5 men who didn't just perform, they owned the room without ever trying too hard. Night after night, they turned entertainment into something effortless, something unforgettable. But on this particular night, something shifted. Something real broke through the glamour. Sammy stood under the spotlight, deep into his performance of I've Got You Under My Skin. His voice wasn't just heard, it was felt. Every note carried weight, every movement had purpose. The room was locked in. You could sense it. This wasn't just a performance, it was presence. Pure, undeniable presence. But not everyone in that room was there to appreciate greatness. At a front table sat a man named Vic the Blade Duca, a figure whose reputation traveled faster than his name. He wasn't there for music. He was there for control, for amusement, for dominance. Surrounded by his crew, drinking heavily, he watched Sammy not with admiration, but with entitlement. The kind of entitlement that believed the world existed for his entertainment. At first it was quiet, small comments, low laughter from his table, easy to ignore, easy to push past. Sammy had done it his whole life. But then, as Sammy reached the peak of his performance, when everything should have been perfect, Vic decided he wanted more. He grabbed a bottle of champagne, popped it open, and without hesitation, sprayed it straight at Sammy. The moment shattered. The music stumbled, the room froze, champagne dripped from Sammy's face, soaked into his tuxedo, blurred his vision. For a split second, time stopped. And then came the laughter, loud, cruel, deliberate. Dance, Sammy. It wasn't just disrespect, it was something deeper, something uglier. The kind of humiliation meant to remind someone of their place. Sammy stood there, still, composed, but only on the outside. Years of experience had taught him how to survive moments like this, how to swallow anger, how to keep going. He turned, ready to continue, ready to pretend nothing had happened. And that's when everything changed. From the side of the stage, Dean Martin walked out. No spotlight, no announcement. Just a slow, deliberate walk to stand beside his friend. He placed a hand on Sammy's shoulder, simple, quiet, but powerful enough to shift the entire room. Then Dean looked at Vic. Did you just spray champagne on my friend? The tone wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It carried weight, real weight. Vic smirked, leaning back in his chair like a man who had never been questioned before. Yeah, he said. What are you going to do about it? Dean didn't flinch, not even a little. I'm going to ask you why. The room tightened, every eye locked in. Because this wasn't part of the show anymore. Because it's funny, Vic replied, shrugging. I paid for a show. I want to be entertained. Dean's expression hardened. Stop, he said, cutting him off mid-thought. Don't finish that sentence. Now the air was different, heavy, dangerous. You telling me what to do? Vic asked, his voice dropping. I'm telling you what you're not going to do, Dean replied calmly. You're not going to sit here and humiliate my friend. You're not going to treat him like he's less than you, not in this room. And just like that, the balance of power shifted. Vic wasn't used to this, not publicly, not like this. You know who I am? He asked. Dean nodded. Yeah, I know exactly who you are, and right now none of that matters. Right now you're just a man who disrespected my friend. Then he said the one thing that changed everything. You're going to apologize? The word hung in the air like a challenge. Vic laughed, but it wasn't the same laugh as before. This one had tension in it. Or what? Or the show ends, Dean said simply. Right now, everyone gets their money back, and tomorrow everyone in America hears exactly why. Now Vic was trapped. Apologize and lose face. Refuse and create a storm he couldn't control. The room waited. Finally, he stood up, his jaw tight, his pride wounded. I apologize, he said. Dean didn't move. Louder. Vic inhaled sharply, then raised his voice. I apologize to Mr. Davis. It was disrespectful. It won't happen again. Dean turned to Sammy. Sammy, still soaked, still processing everything, looked at him, and you could see it in his eyes. Not just gratitude, something deeper, something that had been missing for a long time. I accept, he said softly. And just like that, the music started again. But it wasn't the same. Sammy sang with something new in his voice. Not just talent, not just passion, but truth. Because this time he wasn't standing alone. When the song ended, the room exploded. Applause, cheers, people on their feet, not just for the performance, but for what they had just witnessed. Dean stepped forward, wrapping an arm around Sammy. This man, he said, is my brother. Not friend, not colleague, brother. And in that moment, something bigger than entertainment took place. Something real, something that echoed far beyond that room. Backstage later, away from the lights and applause, Sammy found Dean. You didn't have to do that, Sammy said. Dean looked at him, almost confused. Yeah, he replied, I did. Because to him it wasn't bravery, it wasn't a statement, it was simple. You don't let someone humiliate your brother. Years later, when life slowed down and the lights dimmed, that moment still lived between them. Not as a story, but as a turning point. A moment where dignity was defended, where fear lost, where brotherhood proved stronger than power. And that's what made that night unforgettable. Not the music, not the jokes, not even the stars on stage. But the moment one man stood up, looked danger in the eye, and chose loyalty over silence. Because sometimes the greatest performance isn't the one under the spotlight, it's the one where you stand up when it matters most. The applause that followed Sammy's performance didn't fade quickly. It rolled through the Copa room like thunder, wave after wave of people rising to their feet. For nearly 5 minutes the crowd stood there, clapping, some wiping tears from their eyes. What they had just witnessed wasn't just entertainment anymore, it was something rare, something real. Sammy stood at center stage, still in his champagne-soaked tuxedo, breathing deeply as he looked out at the audience. The spotlight glowed warm against his face, but the emotion inside him was stronger than any stage light. All his life he had been taught a certain rule: smile, perform, take the insult, and keep moving. That was how a black entertainer survived in those days. You swallowed the humiliation and turned it into applause. But tonight had been different. Tonight someone had refused to let him swallow it. Beside him, Dean Martin gave the crowd a small nod before guiding Sammy gently toward the wings of the stage. The band began another tune, the show continuing as if the world had not just tilted slightly on its axis. Yet everyone in that room knew they had witnessed something they would talk about for years. Backstage, the noise of the crowd softened into a distant roar. Sammy leaned against the wall for a moment, letting the adrenaline drain from his body. His hands were still trembling. Dean walked in a moment later, loosening his bow tie like a man who had just finished an ordinary evening. "Hell of a crowd tonight," Dean said casually. Sammy stared at him, half laughing, half overwhelmed. "Dean, do you realize what you just did out there?" Dean shrugged slightly. "Yeah, I stood up for my brother." The word hung in the air again. Sammy shook his head slowly. "That man, Vic Duca. People don't talk to men like him that way, not in public." Dean leaned against the dressing table and met Sammy's eyes. "Maybe they should," he replied quietly. For a moment neither of them spoke. Then Sammy stepped forward and pulled Dean into a tight embrace. No spotlight, no audience, no music. Just two men holding on to something deeper than friendship. And in that quiet backstage room, the legend of Brotherhood grew even stronger than the legend of the Rat Pack.